It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening right now to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host this morning. And we have a ton of things to talk about. You know, the ongoing thing with the Bundy Ranch has really kind of hit a level where it's beginning to, and I said this yesterday, that I believe that the entire disaster will be the historically remembered as the opening shot in what will become a new revolution. And part of that is directly related to the fact that the Oklahoma militia, 50,000 strong, has geared up and stated that unequivocally they will come to the aid of the Bundys in the event that this thing goes any further. They're also looking at, the BLM is looking at 90,000 acres of land where they're trying to, it's on the Red River and the border between Texas and Oklahoma. There's a border dispute going on there. The river moves. Originally, the territory was claimed to have ended at the middle of the river in these wooden stakes. Well, the rivers move, of course. Now there's a dispute about the land area, and so the BLM just says, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just come in and we'll take it. I got to tell you, folks, I don't understand why Americans don't see the handwriting on the wall. I have posted a ton of articles up this morning on our website and on our Facebook page and on Patriot FB and a couple of other places, and I encourage you to get out there and see them this morning. Our second topic is SWAT is totally out of control. There are tiny towns, cities, villages that are building up these militarized law enforcement agencies. The specific one I'm referring to in this particular topic is Hobbs, New Mexico, the teeming metropolis of Hobbs, a grand total of 35,000 population, and this little teeming Minneapolis has delusions of grandeur. You know, you got to wonder, why has our nation become a military encampment? This article exposes it. There's a video in here which they are, it's amazing. They open the video up by saying, the rules of engagement of SWAT are simple. Defeat the enemy any way you can. You know what that is, ladies and gentlemen? This is a bunch of warrior class wannabes. What's happened here is these guys have watched way too many guys running around in Afghanistan and Iraq in military uniforms, kicking indoors, whatever. And they want that for themselves. But they're too old, or they've got families, or they don't qualify, or whatever the case may be, and they can't go. And so they're going to live out their little fantasy right here in the United States. The only problem is that there aren't any Iraqis and Afghanis that they can subjugate. So you're the likely candidate. I mean, a town of 35,000 people with a SWAT department that is set up like this, completely unnecessary. They've got a training or a video in here, which is a recruitment video, in which the entire 30 seconds of this thing, and they're promising how much they're offering to pay, $22 an hour, and $5,000 housing allowance, and all this nonsense, sign-on bonuses. The whole video, they show these SWAT guys raiding house after house after house. Is that what law enforcement, police departments have become? That all we're really interested in is how you can raid. Forget finding the little girl who got lost. Forget, helping the kid get the dog off the roof of the house. How the heck he got up there, nobody knows. Forget solving Mrs. McGillicuddy's burglary. Let's just do raids for a kid with a half an ounce of weed. And hopefully he's got a dog so we can shoot it. Our third topic. Fingerprints are not as unique as you've been told. And why it matters is because, interestingly enough, a study was done in which, I got to tell you, this kind of stuff just drives me nuts. A study was done in which these so-called fingerprint experts were shown the same set of fingerprints 2 different times. Well, turns out that when they started to do the evaluation, now, of course, people are going to prison over these fingerprints, right? Because they say, wow, this proves that this guy was there. 63% of the so-called experts saw a different conclusion when they looked at the same fingerprint for the second time. What? In other words, you were shown the same fingerprint twice, and you came up with 2 different answers, and you're an expert. 63% of them got it wrong. And we have a nation that's locking people up day in and day out for, staggering times of their life based on fingerprints on this flawed, alleged science. See, the problem, folks, is that you're indoctrinated by CSI and all of these other cop shows that glorify cops, glorify them kicking in doors, glorify them using fake and made-up science to solve crimes in 30 minutes or an hour. And it's just an indoctrination box that's hammering the lies into your head. That's why I don't watch television. Because every time I see one of these cop shows where they glorify these cops that, use this high-tech stuff, it's all BS. And the whole country is just falling for it. Our fourth topic, Obamacare. Another bait and switch in the big Banana Republic and a tactic used by Banana Republic dictators. What they did here in California is they added 1,000 doctors onto this list, the Obamacare list. There were 1,000 doctors that were put onto the list as, doctors that were participating in the plan, right? And this was during the open enrollment period. And the doctors were from these prestigious hospitals and, highly rated and so forth and so on. So they got people to sign up based on that. And then right after open enrollment closed, they're like, oops, sorry, that was a mistake. That 1,000 doctor list, those people aren't really part of the program. I'm really just getting tired of the whole thing. And nobody seems to care. It is just everybody in politics is either, covering themselves or avoiding the issues. Well, we have to take some action about that. But never is any action ever taken. We're going to look into legislation for that. I heard Rand Paul the other day talking about this Bundy Ranch thing. Let's just jump back to the Bundy Ranch because we got 14 minutes ago. I listened to him on Fox News. I think he was on, maybe it was Megyn Kelly. I can't remember. And it was either him or Hannity or O'Reilly, or I don't know. Greta Van Susteren had 3 alleged experts on. None of them were experts in law. They were all journalists, alleged journalists, because none of them have any investigative journalism in their history and have no intention of becoming investigative journalists. They just rehash somebody else's news and change the words around so it looks like it's different. And every one of them, every talking head I listened to, said the same thing. Well, Bundy's wrong here, and the BLM was too heavy-handed, but Bundy's definitely in the wrong. And this lawlessness with people going out there to protect their rights with guns is not acceptable. Do you understand what that is? That's the hammer putting the nail into your brain, the indoctrination nail, that it's not acceptable for you to defend yourself against a government and tyranny. Aren't you listening? Every news channel, MSNBC, CBS, NBC, ABC, Communist News Network, Fake News Network, all of them doing the same thing. Dragging forth. And then Rand Paul gets up there. And he's like, well, I've proposed legislation. You know what? Shut the heck up. You've proposed legislation. You've proposed legislation you know will never get passed because you're run by Harry Reid. I mean, what kind of a CYA BS, no guts answer was that? There isn't a single person in this government who has the courage to stand up and say, yep, the BLM was 150% wrong. The land should never have been in the name of the federal government in the first place. Every state was given the right to sovereign ownership of the land when they became a state under statehood. It doesn't matter whether or not Nevada offered to give the land back. The BLM took it in 1993, had no right to take it. They tried to collect a debt using guns. Americans are pissed off. And they ought to be. And that's what every pundit ought to say. But none of them will. None of them. Glenn Beck, I reject violence in any way, shape, or form. Really? And you tout the Founding Fathers as your lead and your guide? They didn't reject violence. When it came time to say, we've had enough and we're going to defend ourselves, they fired. Glenn, what the heck are you doing? Should we incite it? No. Should we encourage people to meekly stand by as they are abused, as their property and their land is stolen from them, as they are fined and intimidated and oppressed and beaten? Is that what we should do, Glenn? And hold up a sign within our little block and say, well, we're in our First Amendment zone, so we have the right to stand here and say, please, 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 we beg you, stop the beatings. Please stop stealing from us. Please, we'll make any concession you want. Just stop. Is that what we're supposed to do, Glenn? Is that what you want? Then we've already lost, Glenn. Then it's no wonder that you're going into theatrical movies. And you're leaving politics behind because it's a waste of your life. That's your statement, not mine. Is there any hope for America? I'm really, truly beginning to think there is not. I believe that at this stage in the game, all has been lost. And it's going to come down to, at one point in time or another, one or another bloody confrontations. And some people are going to be galvanized. The mainstream media and the indoctrination and the re-education system in the country will convince many, many, many people to crawl into a hole and watch silently and pray that they're not next. A lot of patriots are going to die. And that's it. We're either going to win or we're not. And frankly, I'm tired of waiting. And I'm tired of hearing that we're always in the wrong for thinking that. Our founders didn't shirk from their duty, and neither should we. What part of our duty as Americans, what part of our duty as free men have we abdicated to these traitors? And why? I don't get it. I mean, what's the point? Nothing that they say or offer or do, everything is geared against you. Their role and function is simply to bleed you as dry as possible. And if you raise your head up to make too much noise, they just want to lop it off. And America just wants to sit around and, I mean, as long as the free crap keeps rolling, as long as, they can blindly sit in front of the indoctrination box. Indoctra box. That's what it is. They want to sit in front of the indoctra box. The cop holgers, these are the cops who want to be soldiers, are running around flailing and lashing the people over the most ridiculous, asinine stuff. They're kicking in doors. They're beating up old women. I mean, come on. 20 years ago, would you have accepted? Would you have looked at this and said, this is our future? Would you have accepted it? I guess so, because we're accepting it now. And all the knowledge is right in front of us. All the history is right behind us. All the evidence is out there. There's no secrets here. Everybody sees what's going on. Everybody understands exactly what's happening, and nobody gives a damn. You see, you got news people who are really not news people. They're re-education indoctrinators. That's what they are, ladies and gentlemen. They're not describing to you what's going on in the world. They're giving you this skewed viewpoint that will be the same thing you'll get when you're sent to a re-education camp. Think they're not in our future? All right. Go on and live in your ignorance. Whatever. I mean, I'm so tired of feeling like I'm the only one who's willing to actually say what the deal is. Where the heck is Rush Limbaugh on this stuff? Where is Mark Levin? Where is Michael Savage? Where is Laura Ingraham? Where's Hannity? Where? Telling you to keep calm? What, is that the equivalent of the clergy response team? They've been, for all intents and purposes, silenced by either threats or coercion or something else to, keep you calm in the face of, this overwhelming tidal wave of tyranny and oppression that's rolling in on our... I mean, look, folks, just look at it. Where are the voices willing to speak out? Oh, I get it. Nobody wants to get arrested. Rush Limbaugh doesn't want to say, to arms, to arms. I understand. But I got to tell you, I don't know how much longer our nation can consistently sit here and allow this to go on and not be willing to, at some point in time, step up and say, all right, we've had enough. The Oklahoma militia has come out and said, listen, we're 50,000 strong, and we've had enough. Members have come out and said they're taking Bundy's side, and they fear the practice of the BLM would spread to Oklahoma. One of them says, evidently in America, we don't actually own the property anymore, if you ever did. He has no idea, well, maybe he does, exactly how accurate that statement is. He says the Oklahoma militia members are ready to take up arms against the federal government if needed. He goes on to say, it's now up to the feds. The ball is in their court. You can do this legally, or if you want to try to do a land grab violently, you can do that. But we're going to resist you. Just look around the country. They're doing it everywhere. If they can do it in Nevada, they can do it in Colorado, Texas. I mean, what's to stop them from coming to Oklahoma? The only thing to stop them is we the people. And they end the article, which is in the K4, which is News Channel 4 from Oklahoma City, and they end the article with this little indoctrination message. And this is the last thing in there for a reason. Listen to it. It's Senator Jim Inhofe. He says, you've got a bunch of people here trying to take the law into their own hands, and they shouldn't be doing that. But the Bureau of Land Management is not government-owned. It's publicly owned. There's a big difference there. I blame both sides. And then their final sentence is, the Bureau of Land Management released the cattle after confiscating them. In other words, what they're doing is they're saying, after they've given you all of that information about how 50,000 strong militia in Oklahoma says we're ready to fight if necessary, Inhofe comes in and throws the entire thing into disarray and tries to take the righteous, moral high ground out and the wind out of their sails. You got a bunch of people here trying to take the law into their own hands, and they shouldn't be doing that. And the Bureau of Land Management is not government-owned. It's publicly owned, and there's a big difference there. So therefore, now he's saying, see, everybody's just misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. They came with weapons, and that's it. The Bureau of Land Management released the cattle after confiscating them. That's the last sentence. Why? Because now they're saying by the Bureau of Land Management releasing the cattle, all's well and everything's back to where it was, status quo, no harm, no foul, blah, 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 blah. That's the mental image they're giving you. That's why you have to be looking at every piece of information and news with a critical thinking skill set active, in gear. I got to tell you, folks, I'm not sure, where this is going to go, but this is now they're looking at 90,000 acres on 116 mile of stretch of Oklahoma and Texas in the Red River boundary. So the BLM says, well, we'll just do a federal takeover and ownership of the privately held land. I mean, come on. We're going to take a break. I want to wrap up this story here about the Red River, and we're gonna inject that into the next segment, which is supposed to be SWAT is totally out of control. But I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, I feel like I'm wasting my time. I've said everything there is to say. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice. This issue is not limited to the Bundy property and New Mexico. Nevada. The BLM is all over the country, and where the BLM is not, the EPA is, and where the EPA isn't, the National Park Service is, and where the National Park Service isn't, it's the USDA, and where the USDA isn't, the list just goes on and 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 on. Army Corps of Engineers. I mean, it's just one thing after another. Now the BLM says, well, there's this 90,000 acre area along a 116-mile stretch of the Texas and Oklahoma boundary. And so, since there's a dispute on it, the BLM says, well, we'll solve it. We'll just take it. Really? Is that how Solomon solved the problem? Did he say, women, since you can't decide whose baby it is, I'm just going to take the baby? No, he didn't. He said, I'm going to cut the baby in half, and you can each have your half. And the true mother stood up and said, stop. She can have the baby then. She can have the baby. Let her have it. I don't want the baby hurt. And then Solomon instantly knew who was the real mother, didn't he? The BLM in Texas, says Sid Miller, former Texas state representative and Republican candidate for the Texas Agriculture Commission. He says, in Texas, the BLM is attempting to repeat of an action taken over 30 years ago when along the Red River, when Tommy Henderson lost a federal lawsuit. The Bureau of Land Management took 140 acres of his property and didn't pay him a single penny. This is an 86 case where the BLM attempted to seize Henderson's land. Henderson sued the BLM and lost 140 acres that had been in his family for generations. Now the BLM wants to take it one step further and grab an additional 90,000 acres. Not 140, 90,000. Mac Thornberry, a Texas congressman, says, the ranchers represents the ranchers in this region of North Texas. Thornberry's legislative analysis says the issue of the ownership of the land dates back to the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. When the BLM made the claim on Henderson's land, their position was that Texas never had the authority to deed the land to private parties, and therefore it would fall under federal control. The Supreme Court tried to settle the dispute in Oklahoma versus Texas and declared the boundary to be defined by wooden stakes set in the riverbank. This was in 1922, of course. That boundary, of course, disappeared because wooden stakes stuck in the riverbank aren't going to last past the first flood, right? Maybe not past the first season, which was stupid on the part of the Supreme Court. And so the river has shifted its location over time, and in 2000, Texas and Oklahoma legislators agreed to a Red River Boundary Compact. Let me just quantify for you something here. I keep hearing that it's the rule of law that the BLM has the authority for this and that and the next thing. Here's the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I haven't heard one single person, not one pundit, not one talking head, not one legal expert, not one government expert, not one legislator, not a single person, nobody, not even the Bundy people and their supporters and their professional mouthpieces. Nobody said the one thing that everybody ought to be saying. First of all, that the BLM has no authority to exist under the Constitution, and that we never granted Congress the authority to sublet, if you will, our power of attorney to them, to the BLM. Secondarily, that any law that is made that is outside the constitutional and not pursuant to the ends and the goals of the Constitution is no law at all, and it is null and void on its face. And you don't need me to say that. You don't have to quote Mike. You can quote Thomas Jefferson. You can quote James Madison. But I don't hear anybody saying that. Well, the BLM is the law. The law of what? I mean, the Nazis legalized the brown shirts. It didn't make it right. It didn't make them legal. It made them legal on paper. It didn't make them legal in real-world practical application. So the BLM now says they're going to go through a scoping period where they gather facts on land and whose ownership they believe to be in question in Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. They're expanding this. They're in the process of developing a resource management plan. And this plan will actually cover far more than that. It's 411,000 square miles, or 263 million acres of land. The BLM describes, quote, its decision area as about 104,000 acres of BLM-administered surface land, 593,000 acres of split estate land, private land with federal mineral interests, and 5.27 million acres of federal mineral interests on land managed by other federal agencies. Folks, I'm telling you, look, this is just so absurd. What part of government doesn't exist? It's a figment of our imagination. It is us. There is no government. The government is us. They don't own anything. That's the absurdity of all of this. And that's another reason why this militarized crap from every local police department and, the warrior class wannabe, the war fighters, we're war fighters. What kind of nonsense is this? The 30-second commercial by Hobbs, the mighty... it's almost embarrassing, right? You got the mighty mighty metropolis of Hobbs. The rules of engagement of SWAT are simple. Defeat the enemy any way you can. Wait till you hear the music that plays in the background of this thing. It's thrash metal. It's rage music, right? And all they're showing during this 2-minute video is these cops. SWAT are simple. Here, I want you to hear this. I can't show it to you, damn it, because I don't have the right piece of software because I don't have $350 to buy it. What a joke, right? And yet, America is out spending hundreds of millions of dollars on every one of these liars campaigning for office. They're pissing money out the window on studies for tortoises, and I'm just disgusted.
Rules of engagement of SWAT are simple. Defeat the enemy any way you can.
So now the rest of this thing is filled with these guys doing military exercises, firing MP5s, loaded up, geared up, racing around, shooting into tires, crawling on their bellies, firing sniper weapons, racing through these kill houses, blah, 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 blah. All in military gear with police on the back. Now listen to the music. Showing you through a green lens, night vision, gas masks, LRADs, sound devices. This is how these cops think of themselves. This is how they believe that they... it's incredible. We're warrior wannabes. We couldn't make the grade in Afghanistan and Iraq, so we're going to make the grade right here in Hobbs, baby. We need somebody to beat the crap out of, and guess what? It's you. I'm embarrassed that Americans aren't arresting every one of these guys and putting them in prison. I can't even watch the rest of it. Hey, look, you know what? If there's only one reason for you to watch that, it's so that you should be doing the same exact training with your family and your friends and the people in your community, because there's going to come a day when you're going to face them. How's that? Either that, or you're going to stand there quietly and say, "Hands up! I don't have any weapons." And they say, "Put on these cuffs, punk." I don't understand how America can sit here completely complacent and say, "Well, that's not what it means." Really? If a woman walks out of a door and she takes off all of her clothes and winks at you, what does that mean? She's not offering to make dinner. You know, I am so tired of America pretending, because they're fearful, that there's some hidden meaning behind all of this, and it's really not what we're thinking. It can't be that bad. It is that bad. It's worse than that. The 30-second commercial from Hobbs Police Department, the mighty Minneapolis of Hobbs, the teeming metropolis, right? It shows these people, and this is the police chief who says, come work over here. We're paying this $35,000 of this and $22 an hour and a $15,000 bonus for housing. And the entire video is made up of these guys running through residential homes in SWAT gear. Radley Balco answers it up this way. Now ask yourself, what sort of person would be attracted to a career in law enforcement based on the images and the activities depicted in this video? And is that the sort of person you'd want wearing a badge and carrying a gun in your neighborhood? The video isn't disturbing only because of the type of police officer it's likely to attract. It also suggests that the leadership in the Hobbs Police Department believes that these are the aspects of police work most worth touting. That this is the face they want to project to their community. By the way, the mighty Minneapolis of Hobbs is not the only one. Newport Beach, California is another one. Springdale, Arkansas, the town of 70,000, that has a budget big enough to make a video that looks like something out of a Jerry Bruckheimer-produced movie. 3.5 minutes, and it shows these guys standing there in white gloves. You know what this is? This is delusions of grandeur from people who couldn't make the dag-nab grade. If they want to fight in a war so bad, then join the military and go over there to Afghanistan or Iraq and do it there. But these are people who either missed the boat or, they couldn't they couldn't make the grade to be spec ops, special forces. I don't want somebody to live their vicarious fantasy. Not with a gun and a badge. The truth of the matter is, this is what our country and our nation has become. Meanwhile, and I'm going to wrap it up with this tidbit, which I didn't even throw into this segment here. But there's a new article out about how civilians are not ready for an EMP-caused blackout. All right. So, for the record, we've handed literally hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military equipment to local law enforcement, right? Hundreds of billions. We've spent trillions of dollars, literally trillions, on domestic safety, if you will, right? And here's the problem. When we talk about EMP, here's the quote from the guy who is the government expert. The problem is not the technology, says Mr. Pry. We know how to protect against it. It's not the money. It doesn't cost that much. The problem is politics, and it always seems to be the politics that get in the way. Well, my answer to that is that we have squandered trillions on phantom foes while we've ignored the cheap fix to a real threat that is tantamount to aiding and abetting the enemy. Whether you construe that enemy to be a hacker who hacks our grid and brings it down at the cost of millions of American lives, whether you consider that enemy to be a rogue nation state like North Korea that would throw an EMP qualified nuke into the atmosphere and black out 80% of the United States, or whether you consider that enemy to be a naturally occurring phenomenon like a solar flare. The enemy of life, that's what matters, right? And we have squandered trillions on these phantom foes while we've ignored a $2 to $5 billion fix. It is tantamount to aiding and abetting the enemy, not because they're actively helping the enemy, but because they have a solution, they know what the threat is, they can fix it easily, but they won't by choice. Mr. Peter Vincent Pry, the executive director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security and the director of the U.S. Nuclear Strategy Forum, both are congressional advisory boards. He says the technology to avoid disaster from electromagnetic pulse exists, and upgrading the nation's electrical grid is financially viable. The problem is not the technology, says Mr. Pry. Again, I want to repeat this. We know how to protect against it. It's not the money. It doesn't cost that much. The problem is the politics. It always seems to be politics that gets in the way. He says the more officials plan, the lower the estimated cost gets. Quote, if you do a smart plan, the Congressional EMP Commission estimated that you could protect the whole country for about $2 billion. $2 billion. You know what he says about that? That's what we gave away in foreign aid to Pakistan last year. Their estimate is that in the event of an EMP, either man-made or natural or solar or whatever, nearly 500,000 people would die within the first few minutes. That would just be the cars crashing, the airplanes falling out of the sky, blah, 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 blah. The loss of power that everybody who's reliant upon medical devices that are that only operate because of electricity, dialysis machines, breathing apparatuses, blah, 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 blah. The people on the emergency room operating tables who would die because, suddenly the lights go out and that thing that's helping you breathe while they've got you unconscious and they got you slit open from stem to stern fails. Is government's purpose to be a busybody in every aspect and wipe your butt for you, or is it just to protect us as a general umbrella? Just to build a wall around us and then leave us the heck alone so that we can accomplish those things which we are best each individually suited for based upon the gifts that we've been given by nature and God. We did something a couple of years ago when we injected a virus into the Iranian electrical grid and their nuclear aspirational plans called Stuxnet. And the purpose behind that virus was to shut down their critical infrastructure systems. Now, since we know how to do it, they know how to do it. They've actually got it now, and they've probably modified it by this time so that it can be used against us. And if they haven't, then they'll just, hire a bunch of geeks over in China or Romania or some other place, and they'll recreate it or something similar to it. And we developed it in concert with Israel to sabotage the Iranian nuclear enrichment program. These, North Korea, China, Russia, the old Soviet satellite countries, Syria, the Middle East, they've all got an axe to grind against us. It doesn't need a nuclear missile launched from North Korea. They could do it with a virus, insert it into our system. And I got to tell you, I am really just tired of the gamesmanship. These people are toying with Americans' lives, and they really don't even care. They're not about you. If they were, we wouldn't have SWAT departments in every podunk little bent elbow, burg around the nation. I mean, how shameful is that? I posted an article the other day where Balco is trying to collect the names of every town that's got an MRAP. The smallest town is 3,900. 3,900 people. What are you going to do with an MRAP for 3,900 people? You can't justify it. I mean, the threats in this nation are, and the only threats that we should really be concerned about, are from governments themselves and from rogue operators. But the governments are far greater risks to us than any of the rogue operators will be or can be. Terrorists can kill a few thousand, maybe even a couple 100,000 people. But governments kill them by the millions. And historically, if you want to look at slaughter, all you got to do is look for a government. If you want to look at the slaughter of a nation, look at government. We're going to touch on fingerprints are not as unique as you've been told. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to hammer on that. Stick with us. We're going to take a 2-minute break so I can do some localized commercials for some of our sponsors. And we'll be right back. If you're watching it on America's Voice Now, you can simply wait until I return. Just give it about 2 minutes and click the play button, and you'll be able to pick the program back up again. If you're listening on our audio program, we'll just continue. All right. Folks, if you have an opportunity, please make sure that you support our sponsors, including our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. This is the local Pizza Hut here. They sponsor and promote and support this program. And the best way that you can acknowledge that is to go in there and have lunch. Tuesdays and Thursdays are reduced lunch days, and Tuesday evening, kids under 12 eat free. On Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains, Pizza Hut. Swing in there, and whoever your server is, or if you see the manager, tell him you heard about it at America's Voice Now. Please make sure that you visit the law offices of Jason Henry if you have a legal problem or a challenge in your life. He handles, and of course this is the state of Missouri, he handles both state and federal criminal and civil issues. He specializes in gun cases, so if you have one, give him a call at 417-256-4100. He also handles the more mundane things like child custody, divorce, those types of things. So give him a call, and I've used his services, not for divorce or criminal activity, but I have used his services before, and he's been very, very good to work with. And so you can give him a call, again, at 417-256-4100. While you're there, on the square in West Plains, swing in and see our friends over at Patriot Cigar and Tobacco, where you can get the best in tobacco products, whether it be a cigar. They've got hundreds of cigars in humidors there. You can pick what you want. They've got them low-priced all the way up to the high exclusive end stuff. They actually have lockers there, so if you want to go in there and get yourself a locker and you can keep cigars there in your locker, they're all humidified and temperature controlled. They have a room there where you can actually have parties, so if you wanted to have a bachelor party or something, you can do that there. You can get a hold of them if you need to at 417-257-1776. While you're there, swing into Wits End Classic Barbershop, get yourself a great shave and a haircut. Haircuts are $10, and they do an old world style hot lather straight razor shave with a hot towel and the whole 9 yards, and great treat for your guy. Make sure that you swing in there. Do me a favor, if you need to rent something this spring, go to West Plains Rental and Supply. You can call my friend Jeff over there, 417-256-0017. He has all of this, heavy-duty gear all the way down to small stuff, and he'll certainly help you. And then make sure that you swing by our friends at survivalbypreparedness.com and Atlas Survival Shelters as well. All right, we'll be back in just a moment.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I am your host this morning. Thanks for riding with us. I hope you're joining us on our website at americasvoicenow.org. If you're not joining us there, where you can catch us both audio or video, you can also find us on Patriot FB. That's Patriot F like Foxtrot, B like Bravo. It's a website where they carry our audio stream, and it's live every morning from 8 to about 9:45. We avoid the commercials for you, so you can you can also download the application or download the day's program and listen at your own leisure on a cell phone or something else. You can also join us and see our postings over at the constitutionclub.ning.com. Constitution Club is a sister site, or if you will, to it's a Patriot site, and they have something unique and different, which is that they have a little micro site, if you will, for every county in the United States of America. So if you want to meet up with other folks that are in your area that you may know, you may not even know, but you live right across the county from or the town from, then you have an opportunity to meet some, similarly situated individuals. So you can go to constitutionclub.ning.com or, and it may be .org, I apologize, I may have flubbed that. Or you can go to our friends over at patriotfb.com and you can join there. I encourage you to do both, actually. You'll meet lots of people that are similarly situated and minded to you. And there's no lefties, there's no censorship like you're getting on Facebook and all the rest of that. Please make sure that you do visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now and hit the like button because it helps us to boost our numbers. We're a couple of people short on our Spreaker application, so if you wouldn't mind hitting the follow button, I would greatly appreciate it. We're only 2 people short of hitting 100, which would enable us to get onto iHeartRadio. And so if you wouldn't mind going over there to our site at Spreaker.com/user/America's Voice Now and hit the follow button, that would be greatly appreciated. While you're there, you can also download any episode that we've done so you can listen to them at your own leisure. They do have a mobile application that you can get as well, so you can put it onto your cell phone and get a daily update and listen at whenever it's convenient for you. And then last but not least, we have a listen line, which you can gain access to by simply calling 415-325-0725. That's 415-325-0725. After about 10 a.m. in the morning, you'll get that particular day's show, and you can call it at your leisure and do the entire thing. They call it Radio by Phone. That program is sponsored for us. It costs you nothing, and it's sponsored for us by a company called Audio Now, who has graciously offered us that service. So, all of that notwithstanding, and having said all that, please make sure that you find us at Big Country 99 or Rooster Radio at 99.3 on your FM dial. You can find us there from midnight to 2 a.m., and the folks over at Big Country are strong patriots, and we encourage you to, if you're in the radius, which is about a 75-mile radius or 60-mile radius of Houston, Missouri, you can pick up the program at 99.3 Rooster Radio, 99.3 FM. All right. This particular segment, we're going to talk about something which most of you probably aren't aware, which is that all your life you've been told fingerprints are so unique and that you're the only one who has those exact ones, and that fingerprints are empirical proof that you've been there and done that and that you were at the spot and blah, 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 blah. And it's reinforced through the Ministry of Propaganda and all the police shows that you watch, everything from, Chips, right? You remember the John and Ponch or whatever his name was, riding around on motorcycles in California and Miami Mice and all the other stupid shows that they used to have on, all the way up to today's CSI and Crime Scene Investigator and, all of this other nonsense. Well, guess what? It's all crap. You know why? Because it's not the fact that fingerprints aren't unique. First of all, they are not as unique as most people would think. Number one, many times families and biological connections can make fingerprints very, very, very similar. So you might have, a group of individuals in a family whose fingerprints are all very similar. Secondarily, there are people who, especially as they get older, their fingerprints almost disappear. If you'll look at a very aged person's hands, oftentimes you'll find that their fingerprints are almost non-existent. But more importantly, and here's what really matters, there was a study done, and this is an article out of the UK, and the reason why, it's out of the UK is because, well, the study was done over there, but more importantly, you'll probably never see this posted in the United States. You've got to go to a UK paper to read it, because the United States of America wants you completely indoctrinated into the fact that you have no argument against fingerprints, that they're empirical proof that you were there. And it's not true. You know why? Because it's not that fingerprints are unique. What matters is who's reading the fingerprints. And the problem is that the people who are reading the fingerprints are generally not as skilled as they're touted to be. And here's the problem. The guys who are, and girls, who are considered these forensic experts have proven themselves to be wrong in a very, very stunning study. So these people were shown fingerprints, and they utilized those fingerprints to identify the individual. At a later date, they were shown the same set of fingerprints, and 63% of them drew a different conclusion the second time around. Hello? What does that mean? That means that they're only as fallible, that fingerprints are only as empirical as the people who are doing it are fallible or infallible. There's no priest, there's no pastor that's infallible within his church. There's no cop that's infallible to corruption. There's certainly not a single politician that hasn't already fallen to corruption. So, what makes you think some guy who's taken a 1-week course in fingerprints should be making life and death decisions about other people when 63% of them got it wrong the second time around with the same set of fingerprints? Mark Silverman claims that human error, partial prints, and many false positives mean that fingerprint evidence is not as reliable as widely believed. Nobody has actually yet scientifically and empirically proven that fingerprints are unique. And families can share many of the same elements of the same pattern. In other words, the swirls and the whirls and the whatever, the whoop-de-doos and the humpty-blues and all that. Here's the other problem. There are scanning a fingerprint electronically, which is how they prefer to do it now rather than with ink, is a problem for a lot of people, not the least of which is if there are damage to the hands or if they're elderly and their fingerprints don't really show up. Because their skin loses its elasticity, right? I mean, everybody looks at an older person, sees wrinkles, now you know why. This guy Silverman, who was the Home Office's first forensic science regulator, says, essentially, you can't prove that no two fingerprints are the same. It's improbable. But so is winning the lottery, and people do that every week. No two fingerprints are ever exactly alike in every detail. Even two impressions recorded immediately after each other from the very same finger will have differences. It requires an expert examiner to determine whether a print taken from a crime scene and one taken from a subject are likely to have originated from the same finger. However, there are numerous cases in which innocent people have been wrongly singled out by means of fingerprint evidence. In 2004, Brandon Mayfield was wrongly linked to the Madrid train bombing by FBI fingerprint experts right here in the United States. We sent a bunch of forensic experts over there when that Madrid terrorist bombing was done, and they identified the wrong guy. Our people did. Shirley McKee, a Scottish police officer, was wrongly accused of having been at a murder scene in 1997 after a print supposedly matching hers was found near the body. Silverman says, what both cases clearly demonstrate is that despite the way fingerprint evidence is portrayed in the media, all comparisons ultimately involve some human element, and as a result, they are vulnerable to human error. The fingerprint often isn't perfect, especially or particularly at a crime scene. It might be dirty, or it might be smudged. There are all sorts of things that reduce the accuracy. It is important that juries are aware of this. Too often they see programs on television like CSI, and that raises their expectations. What you see on CSI or Silent Witness simply doesn't exist. A study, which was led by Southampton University, found that 2/3 of the experts who were unknowingly given the same set of fingerprints twice came to a different conclusion on the second occasion. You do realize that this is the same kind of junk science as the idea of lie detector tests. Here's the problem. We have prison loads of people who are convicted on the word of alleged forensic experts. And every time that, these alleged experts get caught with their hand in the cookie jar or their pants down or however you want to look at it, the media is silent about it. There was a little bit of a blurb about the woman in, I believe it was in Michigan. She was a forensic expert doing all of this evidence testing for DNA on rape victims and rape, people accused of committing rapes, forensic evidence on fingerprints and forensic evidence of drug. Was it real drug? Was it fake drug? Was it real cocaine or was it, kitchen flour? Turns out she had fraudulently faked the test results on 40,000 cases. 40,000. Not 40, not 400, not 4,000. 40,000 cases. She wasn't even actually doing the tests. She would just take it and say, yeah, this one looks good. You know what her excuse was? I was busy. Really? People are in prison, and you're just too busy to bother with the test. How many people have had fingerprint evidence used against them, and a jury has relied upon that information and the testimony of the alleged expert? You see, what I'm trying to do here, folks, is I'm trying to expose to you that everything that you are presented is all manipulated. And it's intended to make you into a malleable, a little automaton who is, you're told what to do, you do it without question, you follow orders, you never raise the stink, you don't raise your head, you never question authority. Don't you see that authority is all in your mind? And this is a game that psyops are being worked upon you. Everything. It's all lies. I posted articles this morning up about the bond market. You say, well, I don't know anything about the bond market. I get it, and I understand. But the fact of the matter is that the bond market there are companies that are controlling literally trillions of dollars of these bonds. And I got to find it here. Dang it. I don't know where the heck it is. Anyway, the point is simply this. And I don't know, maybe Facebook yanked it off of there. They do that very commonly. Here it is. Trillion-dollar firms dominate the bond market, prompting probes in the U.S. The dirty little secrets that affect your world, but you never knew existed. See, here's the point. Everything is not as it seems. Nothing is as it seems. There are two guys in this article, Bill Gross and Larry Fink, who collectively, between the two of them, manage $3 trillion worth of bonds. So you're trying to tell me that two guys are responsible for $3 trillion in bonds, which is the equivalent size of Germany's entire economy. Since 2008 alone, their holdings have doubled. Now, okay. See, suppose Bill Gross steps in front of a speeding bus. I mean, maybe he is a real genius. But when you're managing $1.5 trillion worth of bonds, everybody's future is in your hands. And I frankly don't think anybody's capable of qualifying for that level of responsibility. Nobody in justice, nobody in the courts, nobody in Congress, nobody in the presidency, nobody. Nobody should have that level of power and authority. And the reason that you don't even know about it is because the media doesn't want to talk about those kinds of things. They don't want you to realize how tenuous a thread, how thin and weak the spider web is that's holding up the entire grand piano. We've been hearing about IRS issues, right? And the IRS is being used to target people. Well, guess what? There's an article in this morning in Washington Times that they revoked the tax-exempt status of a group based on anti-Clinton statements that he made. This is the real reason the government wants control over every organization, every news organization, every reporter, that they want to license you as a reporter so that it can define who can tell you what about whom. It's a police state, people. But the papers won't print it, and the news won't tell you about it, and you're left to your own devices to see it. And that's only if you've got the critical thinking skills to see it and say, I recognize that for what it is. It may not even be something I agree with ideologically or whatever, or empirically, but I recognize that I have to look at this objectively, and I have to be willing to face the fact that there are some things out there I may not agree with that are true. They took away the tax-exempt status from a conservative charity. You know why? The Patrick Henry Center for Individual Liberty, based in Manassas, Virginia. Here's what they said. Quote, has shown a pattern of deliberate and consistent intervention in political campaigns and made repeated statements supporting or opposing various candidates by expressing its opinion of the respective candidate's character and qualifications. So that means that every church, every organization, every 501c3 is all subject to here's what they pointed out as his crime against humanity. This was a comment. The IRS pointed to a column that appeared in townhall.com, right? It's a online alternative media group. April 2nd. Aldrich, the guy who wrote it, is a member of this Patrick Henry Center for Individual Liberty. Quote, if John Kerry promises otherwise ill-informed swing voters lower gas prices at the pump, more than a few greedy registered ignoramuses will follow him anywhere. Another article cited by the IRS was a 2005, so they went back quite a ways, piece that is entitled Stop Hillary Now, which rallied Clinton haters to inform voters of Hillary Clinton's atrocious conduct. You see, that's free speech, folks. That's free speech. The IRS says, but if you have one of our 501c3s, you don't have free speech. We have a stranglehold around you. But nobody in the media wants to talk about these things. Nobody wants to tell you the real issues here. Nobody wants to tell you that lie detector tests are crap and courts won't allow them anymore. And fingerprints are just as big crap because nobody is really an expert on them. That your prosecutor who's convicted your cousin or your uncle or your sister or your brother or maybe you or your dad or your mother or your kid is really not working for the benefit of society as a whole, that he or she is really working and basing their decisions about who to prosecute and how and when on a bunch of political decisions and whether or not it feathers their nest. And the attorney who's representing you doesn't really represent you. They have sworn an oath of allegiance to the court. They owe their oath of allegiance to the court, not to you, no matter how much money you pay them. They are an officer of the court. That is where their highest allegiance lies. They take an oath to the court, not to you. See, the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that everything that you've been taught, everything that you've been, it's all a facade. It's all a lie. And you need to be aware of it because it's what affects and impacts you. You may not think so. You may not see its immediate action against you. But I got to tell you, every aspect of your life is controlled. And that's not what this was about. That's not what we fought, for. That's not what we fought a revolution for. And that's not what we've put all of our time and effort and money and energy into. That isn't right. And it's not what this was supposed to be about. Everything has been skewed. Did you know that a lie detector test is unacceptable in a court of law? And yet, the probation department says we can revoke your probation and put you back into jail based on a lie detector test which you fail. Hello. Let's just make up the rules as we go, depending upon how we feel about you personally. If we don't like you, or you give us too much lip or attitude, then we'll just make a law up and we'll apply it against you. The president says, hey, you know what? I think there's too many people in federal prison, so I'm going to make a unilateral decision to reduce and give them all a break and take them out of jail. Now, look, with all due respect, many of them probably shouldn't have been in there in the first place, but that's not how we do things, folks. This isn't a democratic banana republic. We'll be back in just a second. Boy, listening to all of the opinions and the ideas and the lies, frankly, that come out of everybody's mouth, and I'm talking about politicians, I'm talking about pundits, news people, anybody involved in politics, the unions, the leadership of this group or that group or the next group, even your pastors in your churches. Everybody has got an angle. Everybody's got a hustle. And the question is, are you aware of it, And are you being misled by it? You know, I know people get mad when I pick on churches, and I don't really care because I think churches are one of the organizations that you should have the most ability to trust, and yet, frankly, that's not the way it works. We kind of assume that our government is, or we've always been taught that it was working for our best interest. But it's not true, because it's been so sold down to the special interests and these people who, pay all this money. I mean, I talked yesterday to you about this Princeton and Northwestern study that very clearly states that the United States of America is no longer a republic. I hope you followed through and read that. Now, you may not have read the whole thing, but there is a place for you to grab it and download the entire PDF, which, I mean, it's 42 pages. But here's the point. The researchers come to the following conclusions. The central point that emerges from our research is that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impact on U.S. government policy, while mass-based interest groups and average citizens have little or no independent influence. The truth of the matter is, everything that you thought you knew about, that you understood, that you kind of believed in, is false. And the proof is everywhere around you. I was going to talk to you in this segment about the way in which 1,000 insurers were listed in the Obamacare rolls in California. Now, California put up its own, exchange. And they didn't want to use the federal one. They wanted to build one for California. And there are, I think there's only 2 insurers that are offered there, which, defies the whole idea of choice, right? And it wasn't bad enough that the president lied to us, and it wasn't bad enough that Sebelius lied to us, and it wasn't bad enough that every politician we talked to lied to us, even those who were against it. Everybody's a flippin' liar. Where is honor and integrity and truth and justice in this country anymore? It doesn't exist. Everybody's a liar. I mean, I'm giving you my opinion, but I'm not sitting here clearly misrepresenting facts in order to try to drive you to some conclusion or nudge you, according to Cass Sunstein's Nazi methodology, to redirect society based on these nudges. I mean, how insane is that? Why doesn't everybody just leave everybody alone? Everybody is a flippin' psychopath. Have you not noticed? There is no such thing as truth from anybody's mouth. And these people who work for these organizations will sit there and openly lie in an effort to protect a position that they haven't even really made a decision on. It's just the standard of their company. In this case, this exchange here from California, they put 1,000 doctors on the list of covered doctors that were going to accept, California Obamacare, right? And this was 2 months or a couple of months before open enrollment. And it turns out that, so of course, everybody's looking at the list of doctors and saying, well, if I get on this plan, I can get this doctor who's right near me and he's in this prestigious hospital and, so forth and so on. And I feel much more confident knowing that, I can get Dr. Jones, who's at this prestigious hospital, instead of Dr. Spock, who is at a little clinic over there and he accepts Medicare and he hasn't washed his hands in 3 months. Anthem Blue Cross was the one who did this. And Covered California is the plan that they were calling it. Turns out that none of these doctors in the list of 1,000 were actually accepting Covered California, because don't forget that they're paying Medicare and Medicaid-based rates, right, which are very, very low. Lower even than Medicare. Medicaid is the lowest. I mean, it's indigent care. Let's call it what it is, right? It's free health care for the poor. And so, you go for a doctor's visit and they pay something paltry like, I don't know, $8 or something. I mean, the average doctor looks at that and says, it's not worth my time to get out of bed in the morning for that. By the time I go in and I pay all my medical bills and I pay my malpractice and I pay the rent and I pay the bills on all of this machinery and garbage I have to buy to be in the medical business, and I pay the girls who sit there and set the appointments and the associate doctors who come in and give you the shot and this one who takes blood, $8 a visit just isn't worth doing. I may as well go retire. Or I may as well go to work for a hospital where I just get a salary and that's the end of it. There's no point in being in practice. But it was a bait and switch, and it was knowledgeable and it was willful. And that's my point. Everywhere you go, everywhere you turn, everybody is lying about everything. And I didn't grow up, with the idea that that's where we were headed as a country. I looked at it through utopian eyes as a younger man or something, but I mean, we want to believe because we want to believe, that people we work with and communicate with are inherently being honest with us. But it's just not so. In fact, I think it's the reverse. For you to find somebody honest to deal with is so rare that it's almost impossible for you to, move about in a world like this because you have to distrust everyone. And when you do come across that rare gem of a person who deals with you honestly, your guard is so high that, you may walk away from the perfect scenario because you just couldn't trust that person. And listen, it's not limited to who you're doing business with. It's limited to it goes as far as your doctor. Is he actually prescribing me a pill I need, or is he prescribing it for me because he's got stock in the company, for crying out loud? Or he's been paid by Pfizer or Squibb or SmithKline or whoever is the producer of that drug to make sure that I get it. I don't want to live that way. I really don't. I don't want to live where every minute of every moment of every day I've got to be on my guard about what's the real motivation behind whatever this person is saying and what is their real intention and what. If I've got to sit there and second guess every conversation with every person I have to do business with, then I don't want to do it. The CMA, the California marketplace, Anthem Blue Cross is the trader who did this, and they started acknowledging the error after they were getting complaints from the physicians who were listed mistakenly. How convenient, right? This one woman, she went over, she chose the Anthem plan because the website that the plan had a variety of doctors from Stanford. And she was like, wow, that's great. I mean, this is a highly recognized and well-respected medical organization. And by going over here, I should be getting, great medical care. When I started going through the doctor list, she says, each one, and I called them up, none of them actually accepted the Covered California plan. The premise of Covered California is that you're able to compare plans and see which one is best for you. But if they're presenting that they have all these doctors in the network, but they don't, then it doesn't work. No, what it really means is that you were baited and switched. And that's the name and the premise of this segment. Everything, ladies and gentlemen, is a bait and switch. The entire Obamacare debacle has been a bait and switch. Barack Obama is a bait and switch. Make me president and I'll do all these great things. He becomes president and he turns out to be this rogue, animal that nobody quite believed. The whole idea of, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your health care, don't worry, this is all going to be good. It's only meant to cover the uninsured, so that nobody can go bankrupt. Yet, of course, nobody's actually accepting the plan. And by the way, this is de rigueur. It's not just California. This is all over the country. I'm reading story after story after story of people who were saying, well, I went through the entire doctor's list, and none of the doctors are actually accepting new patients. So I've got insurance, but what good is it? Because I can't actually go get an appointment. Turns out the numbers are finally starting to come back in. Obama administration still will not tell us how many people who signed up have actually paid between October and March 31st. Nobody will tell. But one state came out, I think it was Alabama, and you know what they said? Less than half. Less than half. So the 8 million that Obama is touting might actually be 4 million. And by the way, according to Alabama, not only did less than half of them pay, but all of them were given a subsidy to become members. That means the taxpayers are paying to subsidize those people to get them on. And even with the subsidy, only half of them stayed on. Only half of them, not stayed on, paid their share. Everything that touches your life has now become a bait and switch banana republic tactic. And I got to tell you, people, that's not what I'm interested in my life. I don't want to have to second guess and be fearful that everything I'm told or everything that is presented to me, even in writing by those I trusted, is really, it's like, yeah, I promise, but you got your fingers crossed behind your back. I promise, Mommy, I won't go over there. If that's the world that we've created for ourselves, is that the America that we really expect? That was what we expected we were gonna get? I mean, is that why we're paying all these massive taxes? Is that why we have given up our freedom and our privacy? Is it really? To be lied to be manipulated, to be malleable, to be pounded in like soft copper, pounded into shape. None of us are steel anymore. You see, you can sit there and pound steel with a hammer all day long, and guess what? You're not going to change the shape of it. But you can sit there and take gold or copper, and you can pound it and pound it and pound it, and eventually you'll mold it into a different shape. That's what's happening. We are being pounded into shape. Pounded on every side by police forces who are running around and kicking in doors of innocent people because some guy said, well, I'll get out of trouble, so you got to go over to that house over there and you'll find a half ounce of dope on the kitchen counter. Trust me. No verification, no backup, no qualification of whether or not that guy might have actually been misleading them because he's trying to get himself out of trouble. Let's just go kick in the door and see whether or not he's telling the truth. If you see something, say something. Your entire government is based on everybody ought to be a rat. Your president came out here and said, don't worry about this. This plan I put together is intended for one thing, to cover those people who cannot afford coverage on their own through a pre-existing condition. Guess what? The numbers are back. The CBO, the same group that is supposed to be nonpartisan, which is not possible at all, I might add, and but the CBO comes back and says, after it's all said and done, over the course of the next 10 years, only 25 million people are going to be covered. But those are the same 25 million people, or actually only 25 million out of 35 million who are going to lose their health insurance. We're at a net negative number of 10 million more who have lost their insurance. Not to mention the original 20 million they told us about who needed insurance in the first place. So at the end of the day, we're going to have 35 million people uninsured. We only started out with 20 or 25 million people uninsured. Most of those were illegal aliens that didn't qualify in the first place anyway. So we were sold a bill of goods. And we're going to pay for it. Between now and doomsday, this thing is going to hang over our heads like the swords of Damocles. And every once in a while, they're going to jack the rate. If you think things are bad now, you've only got 40% of the country paying 90% of the bills. What do you think is going to happen when this $1 trillion turns into $2 trillion, turns into $3 trillion? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I don't understand what America doesn't see about what's happening around them. Do you realize that the original tax rates when we first passed taxes back in what was it 1912, 1913, when the IRS initially got its authority, if you want to call it that, to tax us into oblivion? The tax rates, I mean, the highest tax rate you could pay was 6%, and you had to earn like Bill Gates money in order to qualify for that. That was the only way that you could do that. There was no other way that you could be taxed, more than 1 or 2% on your income. The top tax bracket in 1913 was 7%. In 2014, it's 39.6. The top tax range between from the lowest taxes to the highest taxes in 1913 was from 1% of income to 7%. And by the way, it wasn't income on people; it was income on corporations. In 2014, the lowest tax rate you can pay is 10. The highest is 39.6. The top tax bracket in today's dollars in 1913, in order for you to hit the top tax bracket, you had to earn $11.6 million a year. Now, in order for you to pay the highest tax bracket, you only have to break $450,000. Anything above $450,000, and you're paying the highest tax price that's available. In today's tax revenues, today's dollars, we collected in 1913 $16.6 billion of revenue. And that was enough to run the country. Now we've collected $3.029 trillion, and we're still $1 trillion in the hole. The family standard deduction that used to be given out in 1913 was $93,000. In other words, the first $93,000 you made, you paid nothing on. Now, it's $12,400. As if that's enough for a family to live on. That's $1,000 a month. It's not even Social Security, folks. The total number of 1040s filed back in 1913 was 358,000 people. In other words, 358,000 people actually had to pay or file a tax return. You know how many it is now? 145 million plus. Back then, the IRS code had 400 pages. 400 pages. Now, it has 73,954. It had 400. Now it has 74,000. 400 pages, ladies and gentlemen, isn't even the instructions. And yet, no corporations are paying tax, none of any substance. None of these multinationals pay tax. They all hide it overseas, or they get through it with loopholes. They hire banks of accountants and attorneys. They got an accountant and attorney teams like football teams, the size of the New York Giants or the Dallas Cowboys. All they do is sit around and figure out ways to get away from paying. The total tax revenues are $3 trillion. All of that, almost all of it, exclusively brought on the backs of individuals, not corporations, because they're not paying. Yeah, the small company, the guy who hires 50, 80, 125 people, he's paying. But the big companies, the ones who were making billions upon billions of dollars, they're not. And yet, they're the ones who were taking those profits, and they are buying legislation that benefits them. And your congressman is standing there with his hand out, ready to lick any boot that comes along. And it's not just the boots. Everything is a lie. Everything is a scam. Every president that we've had since the dawn of the 20th century, since 1900, has been a tyrant looking to make his mark. They're more concerned about their legacy. What are they going to leave behind in my name? Than they are about Mrs. McGillicuddy and little Bobby and little Stevie. Do they have shoes to wear? Can they walk? I watched Rand Paul the other night. At the same time, he was talking about this crap going on in Bundy land. And, the guy was embarrassing. Well, I'm trying to pass legislation to resolve that. Harry Reid's got the Senate by the short hair, knucklehead. You're not going to get a damn thing passed through the Senate. Especially not anything benefiting the Bundy Ranch. What kind of an idiot are you? But to make matters even worse, then, he and whatever her name was, Megyn Kelly, are talking about this girl who had to walk to school. And she has to take 5 forms of transportation to get to a school where she can go, that she chooses to go to, because she lives in a neighborhood where, the school isn't even worth going to. It's like a little prison, I guess, and full of nothing but riots and violence. And Rand Paul's like, it's such a heartwarming story. It's so heartwarming. Her parents cared enough to make sure that she gets over there every day. You know what Megyn Kelly said? It's not a heartwarming story. It's disturbing. I was mad when I watched it, to think that a kid has to take 5 forms of transportation and her parents have to go out of the way to do what you guys won't do by legislation. Well, it is a heartwarming story. He goes right back to the same refrain. He's such a false, phony fake. Every last one of them. It's a heartwarming story because it shows her parents care enough. That's a parent's job, you dolt. And every parent would do that if they weren't so busy running around like gerbils on a wheel trying to come up with another $3.8 billion a year for you traitors to squander. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is the country that you want, and you're not willing to stand up and take it back in some way, shape, or form, then I got to tell you, I don't know what else to suggest to you. Perhaps you should just go listen to Limbaugh, Rage, or what's his name, AJ, talk about, screaming and yelling. Never offers a solution. Maybe you should go watch Glenn Beck's movies because he's getting out of radio because politics is just not worth his life. I got to tell you, I understand where he comes from with that because I feel like there is not enough I can say or do. I've got an audience the size of a flea on the elephant's butt. And I can't even get the program expanded out there. I pay for it out of my pocket. Once in a while, somebody throws $20, $30. Once in a great while, somebody throws $100 at it. It's so woefully short. It's not worth my putting myself at risk financially and physically and legally for this. Because nobody cares. You've been listening to America's Voice. I'm going to break off and do a couple of moments of commercials for our local sponsors. But I got to tell you, folks, America, time is up. And all of this notwithstanding, there will be no peace in this country. There will be no peaceful resolution to the BLM and the USDAs of the world and the NSAs and the CIAs and the FBIs and the FCCs there will never be a peaceful solution to this. Because they will not let it go. They're going to make this come to blows. Or everyone's just going to get down on their knees and accept it. But there will be those of us who won't go that way. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. You can communicate with me directly by sending me email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. Have a good day. Please make sure that you work with our sponsors, including our friends over at West Plains Rental and Supply. If you have a need for any kind of rental equipment, you can give them a call at 417-256-0017. They do have a delivery service available for larger things like backhoes and stuff like that. Make sure that you see our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop at 417-372-2027, where you can get yourself a great haircut for $10 and lots of other things as well. Friends over at Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop at 417-257-1776. Great place for cigars, tobacco, pipe, tobacco, and every accessory under the sun. The law offices of Jason Henry, where you can get your legal problems resolved quickly and effortlessly and for the right price at 417-256-4100. Our friends at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. Tuesdays and Thursdays is reduced lunch, and Tuesday night, kids under 12 eat free. And my friend over at the Battery Station. Make sure that you visit their website at batterystation.com. You can call them at 417-257-7799, and you can also make sure that you visit them at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains, 417-257-7799. All right, folks, that's it for us for the day. Communicate with me by mail at Mike at America's Voice Now. God bless.